Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of our podcast organized by the Center for Writing and Communication. You may know that as CWC, housed in Ashoka University, Sonipat, Haryana. In our podcasts, we cover topics mostly based on academic writing, also translation, which is again a part of academic writing in one way. Today, we are taking a slightly different route, and we have today Professor Mahesh Rangarajan to talk about the Cheetah Project of India that recently has generated some controversies among the environmentalists and biologists. In this podcast, we will hear from Professor Rangarajan about the project itself, the history of the project, and its future in India. Without much further ado, let's begin our podcast, our conversation with Professor Rangarajan. Mahesh Rangarajan is a professor of history and environmental studies at Ashoka University. He is also the chair at the Ashoka Archives of Contemporary India. He has previously taught at the University of Delhi and at Kriya University. He has also been visiting faculty at Cornell University, at Jadavpur University, and in the National Center for Biological Sciences, Bangalore. He was the chair of the Elephant Task Force of the Government of India in 2010 and member of the Forest Advisory Committee of the Ministry of Environment, Government of India from 2008 to 2012. Professor Rangarajan, we are privileged to have you on board today. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet us. And it's an honor to have you on board and know about your opinions on the Cheetah project. This project has, as you would know, that has generated some controversies, various sorts of opinions, concerns from even experts, from experts as well as from non-experts like me. And non-experts like me, that's why I have got interested into this project, the future of the project, the general well-being of the cheetahs in India after they have been reintroduced in the Indian land. So we are very honored to have you on board today and know your opinions about the project. So can I go ahead and ask you a few questions now?
My privilege. Please go ahead.
So India has had cheetahs in the past. What is the exact controversy of bringing them now? And in relation to this question, is it just that these are African cheetahs and not Asiatic cheetahs, or is there anything more to it?
This is a very good question. The cheetah became extinct in India after independence. The last recorded shooting of cheetahs was in 1947 in central India. And there are records of sightings about 20 years later. Its extinction, of course, followed a long process of decline. And as a historian, I had studied this first for my book, 1996, Fencing the Forest, and later from archival records. Many reasons were there for its decline, but one of the ideas of discussion about the cheetah and its return was that it is the only large mammal that became extinct after independence. So India has lost other mammals such as the Javan rhino from the Sundarbans, the Sumatran rhino, and the Banteng in Manipur. But the idea of getting cheetah was first discussed in 1984 by the Indian Board of Wildlife meeting in Kuno National Park. Controversy has been about two issues. First is the timing right in terms of having suitable habitat and prey, which is a very significant consideration. The other, which you hinted at, which is there are two subspecies of cheetah, Africa and Asia. And there had been discussion in the past about Asian cheetahs from Iran, but there are very few, less than 50. And so government took the decision, actually around 2009 in principle, to consider bringing in cheetahs from Africa. So there's a question of whether the timing and place in terms of the conditions are right, and whether these are the right cheetahs at all. That's the debate.
Okay, that's helpful. So Kuno was being prepared for the translocation of Asiatic lions from Gir, as per the, as far as I have read in the newspapers and in the articles published in various platforms. That was what Kuno was being prepared for. But now, since that did not materialize, is it congenial for the African cheetahs as well?
This is a difficult question to answer, and I must clarify, I'm a historian, not a biologist. I'm a biologist and ecologist have to tell you the answer to the second part.
Okay.
But on the first, you're correct. There was a debate soon after independence about the possibility of a second home for the lions of Gir, the only lions in Asia, and the only one of a subspecies which we now know to exist in Asia and parts of North and West Africa. But the idea of Kuno was picked from 4 places which were studied. The note was prepared and the report submitted in 94. As you are well aware, from around a year later, Gujarat, there has been resistance in Gujarat to the idea of parting with lions. And in the last 50 odd years, Gujarat has done a superb job of protecting lions. Their numbers have grown from less than 180 to officially over 700. Their range is also expanded well beyond the Gir protected area, which is about little less than 2,000 square kilometers. Lions are there at about 30,000. So in this situation, government decided, in principle was in 2009, but the actual choice was taken over the last year to go ahead with the cheetah introduction. Whether this will work or not, we'll have to wait and see.
Right. So then there is also another aspect that the grasslands of Kuno will be enhanced by the reintroduction of cheetahs from Africa. What are your thoughts on this? How would the cheetahs from Africa enhance the grasslands of Kuno?
See, one point we need to understand is cheetahs are one species, Acinonyx jubatus. Acinonyx is the genus, jubatus is the Latin name for the species. All cheetahs in the world are cheetahs. Stephen O'Brien, who's a very major scholar, has written a remarkable book, Tears of the Cheetah, shows that they diverged around 10 to 12,000 years ago. Their genetic base is quite narrow. So the Asian African cheetah can interbreed. They are actually, I repeat, the same species. The question is not so much whether they're African or Asian. There is the issue of the habitat and prey. And records of the late 19th century indicate cheetahs were present in 3 kinds of habitat. This is a species with a wide range going as far south as Tirunelveli in South India, as far east as Palamu, now in Jharkhand, across north, west, central India, and present-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. So it was found in the Deccan Plateau, in ravine areas. It was found in scrub jungle as well as grasslands. So it was never purely a grassland animal. We think of it as a grassland animal, partly because of the remarkable numbers in places like the Serengeti, Masai Mara, East Africa, and because of the wonderful paintings of the Mughal era, where they are shown hunting in tree-covered grassland in North India. But the habitat was somewhat more diverse historically.
Okay. So, I mean, from there, that are there any insights from the past attempts to reintroduce big cats into former habitats India? Do we have any precedents?
It's a very good question. In fact, in 1910 and 1920, the Maharaja of Gwalior, Madhav Maharaj, brought lions from Eastern Africa. They were released into the same forest where cheetahs are being released now, Kuno. And the Kuno area was a vast hunting reserve of the Sindhyas. The lions bred, they successfully propagated. They spread out over a large area of the forest. Some of them turned cattle killers, some turned man-eaters. They had to be shot. And some wandered further afield. That was the first. There are also less well-known but very important introductions of the tiger into Dungarpur Banswara forests in the late 20s, where they had recently been exterminated. The population bred, they were stable till the 40s when they were wiped out by poaching and illegal hunting. And the leopard in Kutch, which still survives by the ruler of Kutch. Post-independence, the only major case of an animal brought back to an area where it had vanished decades ago was of the lion Chandraprabha sanctuary in UP. Very similar story to what happened to the Kuno lions. They bred, they dispersed, and they were poached and shot. Recently, there have been tiger reintroductions in Panna and Sariska, where they had recently been extirpated. And Panna, of course, is in Madhya Pradesh. It has been reasonably successful.
And so you said that in some of these cases it has been a success, while in some other cases it hasn't been. So, are there any other instances where other mega animals, mega mammals in India or elsewhere in the world, where there has been some similar instances of, mix of success and not so much of a success?
Naturally, this is, releasing a few animals is one thing. Having a successful breeding population into the second, third generation, where they propagate, is more complicated. The most celebrated case, of course, is the American bison, which was almost exterminated. They were bred in the Bronx Zoo, and some were brought from Canada. And almost all the bisons in the wild in the US, there are hundreds of thousands, are descendants of those bison. Less well known is the European bison, which was done in the Białowieża forest in the 1920s to the 50s in Poland. Within India, there is the rhino, 1983, which was moved from Kaziranga in Assam to Dudhwa in UP. And there have been other recent, reintroductions of wild ungulates. So Madhya Pradesh is quite significant. It has done so with the Central Indian Barasingha in Bori, and also with the Gaur in Bandapur. There is a difference, you see, with the ungulates, they will live on the forest and on the herbs and grasses. With carnivores, there is always the worry that they may get into conflict with human populations and livestock.
Yes.
And very celebrated, well-known over the last 30 years has been the return of wolves to Yellowstone Park. And you may be interested to know the ranchers of Wyoming and Montana warned that if a wolf stepped into their ranch, they would shoot it. They had a sticker called Wolf, Saddam Hussein of the animal world. And it has required a lot of work by the US Park Service. If you see a wolf on your ranch and you radio them, they will immediately come, capture it and take it away. So this is always a fraught and complicated issue, bringing back a large carnivore. And the Panna Sariska instances, of course, particularly Panna, are significant. But the human dimension is worrying. And of course, there is the question of whether they'll adapt and breed. There are a number of challenges there.
Okay. So we don't have any definitive answers to these questions, and it's all a matter of time how these are going to pan out. And I'm also particularly interested in the human dimension that you are talking, the human animal contact. And when they do come in contact, how does that contact actually pan out? You gave the example of the Yellowstone National Park and the reintroduction of wolves. That sort of started preying on the livestock of the humans nearby. So, am I correct?
No. There were fears that it would prey on the livestock, but those have been very few instances.
Okay.
Let me be clear. You see, ecology is about the study of the structure and function of nature. History is about the study of the past from the viewpoint of the present. And both these disciplines, ecological sciences, the humanistic, historical sciences, prepare us for the future. They cannot predict the future. We can prepare for it with insight. So one of the insights is there is no magic bullet. But a critical insight is that the human dimension is very crucial. If you go back to Kuno, it is a 750 square kilometer park. Some 24 villages were relocated. Prof. Asmita Kabra of Ambedkar University has extensive research about those villages and their conditions. In some dimensions, the relocation was done better than elsewhere, but in many ways, there are many unfinished tasks and their socioeconomic condition could have been far, far better than it is. So there is this larger forest area of over 3,000 square kilometers, which is possible suitable cheetah habitat. Now, will there be an attempt to have cohabitation here with different people? And one of the pluses with cheetah is that its conflicts with humans directly are nil. They don't prey on humans, kill or eat them. They never do. But they may come into conflict with livestock, particularly goats and sheep. The other, of course, is whether the prey base within this area, 750, will be adequate for them. These are questions we will only know as we move forward. And it is natural that the apprehensions and all debate is welcome. We should, in a democratic system, have debate. But neither ecology nor history can give us definitive predictive conclusions. These are scholarly disciplines. It's not stargazing or some form of future forecasting.
Right. And what is the wider significance of ecological restoration or rebuilding of damaged ecosystems?
I think it's a very good question. See, when you look at a country like India, only 5% is protected areas, sanctuaries and parks. But there are, as we know, very significant presence of nature well beyond these parks. Over a third of the tigers over the last 20 years, there's fantastic tiger tracking now. Over a third of the tigers are outside the parks and sanctuaries. 60% of elephant habitat is beyond them. These areas contain large variety of plant and animal species. The idea of an intact ecological system is that the various parts of the system are in order. And top order predators like the cheetah or the lion or the tiger, one could cite the wolf or the caracal, both of which, by the way, are in danger. Their presence would indicate a healthy ecological system. And the idea of rewilding would be that the nature system be allowed to play its course. This is not as new as it sounds. After all, there have been areas which under protection have recovered within the reserves. But the pattern of protection you may have beyond these reserves may be different. It will have to be more inclusive. And many of these species may play a very critical ecological role. So for instance, the presence of cheetah would indicate that the grassland, scrubland, dryland, arid, semi-arid land system is working. Recently, there are efforts to breed in captivity a very, very endangered bird, the great Indian bustard. And these initial efforts seem to be successful, the Rajasthan Forest Department with the union government. But were they to put the bustard back in its habitat, it's a very large ground bird. It weighs almost 14, 15 kg. It would mean that that system is in working order. And in the present, in many parts of India, because the pressure on land is reducing, particularly I want to emphasize in southern Western India, it may be possible to have restoration of systems. And there are many areas where if the habitats are suitable locally extinct species, we can try to rebuild their populations. This may be not only with animals, but also keep in mind it includes flora. Right now, under the leadership of Professor C.R. Babu, retired professor of Delhi University, Center for Damaged Ecosystems is helping to, transform the ridge because much of it is taken over by an invasive exotic Prosopis juliflora. So if they remove it and a lot of the local tree species come back, it will help the flora, the fauna, the microfauna. So rewilding, or rather ecological restoration, is a very important challenge. And along with conservation, preservation, protection in the new century, it represents a very fascinating opportunity, not only for ecologists, but also for people working in the sociological disciplines. And it may be important in an era of climate change and larger environmental changes. So rather than see this conservation, fauna, flora, ecology simply as heritage, which it is, simply as important for knowledge, which it's also a part of the sort of broader principles of good housekeeping on a small planet, where we need to try and understand how nature systems work. And today we have some of the skills and expertise and capabilities to start doing that.
Okay. And, since we're talking about the Cheetah Project, the Lion Project also, and you have already talked in bits about the Lion Project in Gujarat. Just another question on that topic. India has had a Lion Project in Gujarat in 1972, Project Tiger nationwide a year later. So how are these two different? How is the Tiger Project different from the Lion Project that started in Gujarat in 1972?
Excellent question. Well, one answer is simple. There are no lions anywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa. And there are no lions in the whole of Asia. This was a species whose range went from Palestine in the west right through to eastern India and the river Narmada. And in the case of the lion, the focus was on the Gir forest. It was to secure and protect the Gir ecosystem. With the tiger, it was a larger project because at the time it was launched, there were tigers in 11 of the 16 states. And they set up 9 tiger reserves. The principles were similar. In each of them, there was a small area known as the core, where if there were resident communities, they were moved out, forestry was stopped, and they tried to have ecological recovery of the cycles of nature. A larger buffer zone where human use continued, such as forestry, agriculture, some cattle keeping, but it was maintained as habitat for the wildlife. And both projects have had a very interesting career. With lions, we refer to the success. There is an Achilles heel. The lions are inbred. There was a population bottleneck from genetic studies around 2000 years ago, O'Brien and others. There's another genetic bottleneck around 100 years ago. Tiger situation, Professor Uma Ramakrishnan of the National Center of Biological Sciences and others have shown there's enormous genetic variability among Indian tigers. But again, care has to be taken to ensure there is genetic variability. But the Project Tiger is more extensive. There are a number of tiger reserves. They're in several states. The challenges continue. We are still looking at a country which has, compared to when Project Tiger was launched, twice the number of people. India has 1 out of 5 domestic ungulates on Earth. We're also a country where new linear projects are coming up, such as national highways, train tracks, there are fossil fuel extraction. But both these projects are significant because they have shown consistent commitment, both of state and union government, in times when resources were tight. Perhaps one dimension could be even stronger, which is the citizen participation, and much more care to see that the more underprivileged groups who depend and rely on those areas are brought aboard. And Tiger Task Force 2005 gave a number of measures and steps that could be taken. The lion situation is different. The lions have a range of over 30,000 square kilometers. They are there. If you go to the web, you'll be astonished the type of home videos which have been uploaded on lions. Lions in backyards, lion drinking from a water trough, lion sleeping in a car park. And one must say that in a variety of ways, people of not only Saurashtra but adjacent areas of Gujarat, they've had a very important role in accepting the lions as part of their fabric. And this calls for much more study. And with tigers, it's a more complicated situation. There are certain areas where conflicts are sharp. Tadoba is one. Sundarbans is another, particularly human-tiger conflicts. But both projects are important, as you indicated, they're over half a century.
Okay. And also, I mean, as a concluding question, cheetah has always been a part of the Indian culture. I mean, we visit, certain museums and we see Maharajas with, with their trophy cheetahs killed and hunted. So, can you tell us something about how far the cheetah has been part of this Indian culture and how it has been, one of the, most wanted and hunted animals among the Maharajas of the past?
See, the cheetah was hunted, but it was never a prize animal such as the tiger or the lion, partly because of its size. Of the big cats, it is the lightest and smallest.
Okay.
And as we indicated, it doesn't attack and kill people. One of the thrills of hunting the tiger and lion is that rulers could also portray themselves as defenders of the people or of the livestock.
Right.
But you're right, the cheetahs were trapped in large numbers. We have evidence going back to the Manasolas of Chalukyas about cheetahs being trained for antelope hunting. And certainly in the Sultanate period, in the Mughals, and also in parts of the Deccan, Nizam of Hyderabad, for instance, Asaf Jahis, they have kept cheetahs. Now, these cheetahs are being taken out of the wild. So you go and trap a number of cheetahs, keep them and train them for hunting antelope. The effect on the wild population is the same as going and killing them. And as we know, Akbar had possibly over 1,000 cheetahs. So there was a drain on populations because of capture for keeping for hunting. The other big change, and I think is very important in the colonial imperial period, particularly from 1870s, I've researched this elsewhere. There's a period of 50 years when cheetahs are being killed for rewards. And they were seen as harmful to the keeping of goats and sheep. It's also a larger war against what were labeled as dangerous beasts. And this practice continued right into the 1920s. And cheetah gets a measure of protection the first time, only in 1931, in the game rules of Mysore state. And interestingly, the first meeting of the Indian Board of Wildlife, 1952, chaired by the then Maharaja of Mysore, decided to protect the cheetah, but also admitted that it was probably extinct. So I think cheetah has been there in India, particularly in the miniatures and records. There are very important references in other Sanskrit manuscripts. But honestly, the centrality of the lion, you think of Indian rulers sitting, certainly from early centuries of Common Era, on the Simhasana or the lion throne. There has been a lot of reports recently on, Mahabalipuram as a very important tourist site, maximum footfall. Mahabalipuram has fascinating stone-cut temples, many of which depict lions. There's a lioness hunting. And the person who has drawn that lioness has obviously seen the posture of the lioness when she's hunting. Tigers, of course, are interesting in the 18th century for a ruler who keeps coming back and forth in present-day controversy, Tipu Sultan, because he was known as Tiger of Mysore, and he sat on a tiger throne. I don't think cheetah was as central, but one could argue that cheetah was seen as a creature of great elegance and speed. In the Mughals, they had a number of books, and one of the remarkable books is called the Baz Nama, the Baz being the falcon. And you wonder, why have they put the cheetah among falcons? Well, the answer we are told by the author is that the cheetah runs so fast that for a few moments it seems to fly. And for the purposes of a hunting animal trained to hunt, it may be classified as a falcon because it flies for a few minutes. Now, this is very interesting. So I think it captured the imagination for its grace, its elegance, and its speed. And I do want to emphasize India is at the edge of the Western range, global range of the cheetah. So this is a very significant initiative. This is an initiative to bring animals from one continent to another, from one kind of habitat to another, and from two countries, Namibia, South Africa to India. And we are all countries which have undergone long period of imperial colonial rule.
Right.
It is a very significant attempt. We will know whether it succeeds or fails only in the fullness of time, maybe 20 or 25 years. And why since it has commenced, the debate should continue. And the larger significance for India is that heritage of a country is not only about its monuments, Taj Mahal, Mahabalipuram, Brihadeshwara temple, the temple of Kamakya. It is not only about the languages, the cultures, the literature, the forms of food. It's equally about its natural features, its mountains, its trees, its rivers, its coastlines. And in that sense, efforts to protect, just to give an instance, the 530 odd mammals, or the over 1,000 species of birds, 100,000 species of plants, these are also an attempt to connect with the past. By keeping these intact in the free state, we also try and understand the relationships of nature and culture, which have shaped countries such as ours. It's not a coincidence Indian national anthem written by Gurudev Tagore has names of so many mountains and rivers. And it's also interesting that national animal of India, tiger, is also the national animal of a neighboring country, Bangladesh. So the nature can connect and bind people together. It can be a civic project. And I really like your question about connecting us to the past. The past of our history includes our engagements with nature. Some have been destructive, all these people hunting huge numbers and killing mass numbers of animals. But it has also had regenerative elements and times of harmony. And it's very important to, as we reject the former tradition and embrace the latter, to try in new ways to intervene. And so it's a very good question. In tending to nature, we are not only addressing environmental imperatives, we are also trying to have a wider and more mature sense of our own history.
Right. That's really excellent and very enlightening. I myself, as a non-expert, not an environmental historian, not a biologist, not a conservationist, I have been reading reports on the Cheetah Project in various platforms, and I've been so interested to find out about the efficacy, the homework that has been done, to the extent of the research and homework that has been done to reintroduce these mammals in the Indian forests. And overall, I have been very interested to know from somebody like you, Professor Rangarajan, that what could be the future of this project. And like you said, that the future is we can't predict the future, and it's a matter of time, and it's something that we have to wait and see. But this is definitely what came out of this conversation, that it is definitely an important project, and debates should continue, because we live in a democratic country, and debates should continue about this, about the reintroduction, about their prey base, their well-being. uh, what makes the cheetah special, its speed, and so on. So it has been extremely interesting to have you on board with us today. And I was also very interested about the history of this project, in tandem with the history of other similar projects, like the reintroduction of lions, not just in India, but also, elsewhere in other countries. And if there are some sort of, methodological similarities in the reintroductions of these mammals in different settings. So it has been an extreme privilege for us to have you on board today. And we do hope that our listeners, our viewers, they enjoy this podcast, they listen to this podcast, and if they have, like me, if they have any questions regarding the sustainability of this project, regarding the efficacy of this project, regarding the future of this project, regarding the debates that it should sustain, that should sustain about this project, I strongly encourage everyone to listen to this podcast. This is a very different podcast that we as a center, as a writing center, did. We also try to branch out from conventional writing strategies and topics to other disciplines also, that are especially on topics that are now, how to put it, very topical, and they need discussions. And thank you, Professor Rangarajan, for joining us today. I enjoyed this conversation thoroughly, and I learned a lot from you. And we hope that we can, continue this conversation in another episode. Let's talk more. And uh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh,
My privilege, and thank you so